For the Haters presents Wallet Therapy. I'm Becky, the spender.
And I'm Alex, the coach. We give money advice for the everyday person. So join us with your budget and your baggage because money doesn't have to be messy forever. Search For the Haters and subscribe today.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wallet Therapy presented by For the Haters. Alex, hello.
Hello.
How are we doing today?
I'm so excited to be here and talk about debt.
Well, first, happy tax week, right? Taxes are due soon.
Yeah, hopefully everybody is well on their way to filing.
And if you aren't, this is your little reminder.
12 days left.
And when this comes out, it'll even be less.
Yeah.
So we are here to talk about debt. I was in a rabbit hole last night, really just looking into all the things. And I'm going to start off by saying I'm in a lot better place than I was 2 years ago. My debt is dwindling away, but it can still be like a struggle, overwhelming, anxiety inducing, right? Like sometimes I just feel like I can barely keep my head above water. I know that I'm not the only person that feels this way when it comes to debt. Like, where do you even start? How do we even begin to take control of this? It's overwhelming, right? Like, am I crazy for feeling that way? Or do you agree that other people are just like in this overwhelmed state?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's pretty heavy out there. When we look at some of the stats, the average American household is carrying over 100,000 in debt. And if we're just talking about credit cards, the average individual has about 6,500 in high interest balances on credit card. So if you're talking household, now we're at 13K. The US debt, household debt, just hit a record of $17 trillion.
What?
Yeah. That's how in debt Americans are.
Who do we need to call?
I know. Our listeners probably feel like they're failing. And I'm here to tell you that part of it is a systematic trap and you're not failing. We're here to talk about that today and some of the tools to help yourself out of it.
So I think I've said this, I'll be vulnerable, I'll be honest. I think I had like 30 grand in credit card debt at my peak. I had over $140,000 in debt alone by myself. I have conquered my high interest debt. I think I paid off my credit card debt last year, and people are probably, Becky, how'd you do that? I picked up more work. I was designing more websites. I was doing a lot more work on the side. This was actually before, I got back into podcasting. And so that's what worked for me. I knew that I could do that. I had the capacity to do that. There's definitely different options that people can, but I understand what debt is. I'm not completely out of debt either.
Also, for the listeners too, it wasn't just about making more money. It was changing your behaviors so that when you had extra income, you were intentional with it. And we've set up a program of how to tackle your debt, and you followed that, because we did talk about a little bit getting out of paycheck to paycheck isn't always about making more money. That's the same with debt. Paying off debt isn't always just about making more money to have more to pay off. It's about the behaviors you're changing. And you mentioned you paid off your high interest debt. So let's talk a little bit about that so the listeners can understand what that means, because there's a difference, right? Most debt has some sort of interest rate that you're paying. And I like to coach clients to look at debts that are 7-8% or higher, and that's considered your high interest debt. And the reason is because when you look at the total stock market, in the history of the stock market, it makes about 10%. If you adjust for about 3% inflation, we're at about 7%. The rule of thumb is if you can make more by investing it, it's better to pay those debts off long term and then invest the money instead of putting it towards those low interest debts. But if it's high interest debt, that's costing you much more than you could actually make by investing it. And you want to get those high interest debts paid off immediately. Credit cards are typically the number one killer there.
I was in a really bad cycle when I was in credit card debt, was consolidating my debt for 0% interest for a year. But my issue was I kept spending money. So it was just like this forever cycle of consolidating my debt, getting it paid off, but growing debt on the outside of that as well.
Many of the listeners out there are probably thinking that they want to do a similar strategy. I'm not here to tell you can't consolidate your debt. What I would like to caution is that if you don't change the behaviors before you do debt consolidation, you are just literally moving debt from one place to another. You're not actually paying it. And just as you said, you will end up in a worse position because now you have freed up your credit cards and you end up spending on them because your quote unquote emergencies pop up and you create all these justifications in your head of, okay, just this one thing, I'll pay it off, but you don't end up paying it off. And now you're in this danger area where you've consolidated debt into a personal loan and now you've racked up credit card debt again. So for anybody out there who's thinking of using this strategy, please, please, please be honest with yourself about have you changed your spending habits? Because this is not going to be a shortcut if you just end up racking up more debt.
So if you've changed your habits, this could be a good option for you. There's options out there to look into and consider. But if you have not, do not fall into my footsteps and do not consolidate your debt and keep on spending money that you do not have, because it is a vicious cycle that you get stuck into. And I did it probably 5 freaking times. And you end up spending money because there's like a fee to transfer the money as well. The amount of money I've wasted in the past 10 years is insane. Like it's absolutely insane.
If we just look at, let's give an example out there for how much our high interest debt is actually costing us. We'll take the average individual credit card debt, which is $6,500, and say you're paying 20% interest on that. And that's relatively, I think most credit cards are probably in the like 25%, even 30% mark. Mm-hmm. So we'll just use 20%. And you're making the minimum payments only. Guess how many years it will take you to pay off that credit card?
6 years?
9.5 years.
Ugh, that makes me sick.
To pay off one credit card. And it will cost you more in interest. It will cost you roughly $7,500 in interest. So that's $1,000 more than the original debt that you actually put on it.
So let's talk about, I have, when I go into my removing debt journey, there's 2 aspects to it, right? Like I have my high interest debt, I have my smaller balances. I get a sense of you can keep doing this when I pay something off. So sometimes I know it's important to me to pay something off rather than paying towards that high interest. Is that okay? Like, is that something that you would advise for someone to do?
I think that's a great strategy. So typically what you're talking about is 2 different strategies out there that listeners probably have heard, which is Snowball versus Avalanche. Snowball means you are going to take your smallest balances and pay those off first. And Avalanche method means you're going to take your debts with the highest interest and pay those off first.
Mm.
What I find with my clients is that most people, money is not mathematical for them. It is emotional for them. And the best strategy is going to be the strategy that you can stay consistent with, because neither strategy is going to work if you cannot work the strategy all the way to the end and get debt free or pay off the card or whatever the goal is. I typically see that using the Snowball, which is paying that smallest balance off, is a better strategy for most people because they get motivation by getting to like check off the list. Okay, that credit card's done. Cut it up and put it in the garbage. That credit card's done. Check it off the list, cut it up and put it in the garbage. And those are small wins that you can celebrate and keep you motivated along the journey. And so I tend to see people are more consistent with that. Another key factor is if you're somebody who has, 5, 10 credit cards, maybe a couple of student loans, personal loans, you have a lot of minimum payments to meet. And if you miss one of those, now you're getting late fees on late fees, and it's going to affect your credit. So that is also a negative to take into consideration. If you are able to use the Snowball method, pay the smallest balances first, now you're reducing the number of minimum payments that you have. So you put yourself in a little bit of a safer situation where you won't have to be at risk for missing a minimum payment and getting that fee. If you are on here listening and you're like me, who is very analytical thinker, and you just want to see the numbers and you want the numbers to make sense, then the Avalanche is your best friend. Because
let's talk a little bit more in detail about the Snowball, or I guess the Avalanche as well, right? Like and I think we've maybe touched base on this just because it's what really helped me continue to pay off my debt was once something was paid off, that money isn't freed up, right? Like that money, goes into that next thing.
That's what I like to call the double Snowball, or the Snowball and Avalanche. That is an extra payment. What happens is let's say you're using Snowball method, you are going to start paying off your smallest balance first. Say that balance, your minimum payment was $100 a month. As soon as that smallest credit card is paid off, you are going to not take that $100 and put it back into your spending plan for spending money. You're going to take that $100 and you are going to apply it to your next debt. So now that next debt, maybe you had a minimum payment of $80. Now that payment every month that you are going to make is going to be $180. And then you rinse and repeat. So once that next balance is paid off, you take that $180 and put it towards your next one. This has such a compounding effect. It is unreal. Let's do another example. Say you have $25K in debt, and that is a mix of credit card, personal loan, maybe a little student loan. If you were to pay minimum payments on those debts and never put an extra dollar, it would take you about 13 years to pay off $25K and cost you about $20,000 in interest. Now, if you do the Snowball and so start with your smallest balance and then you move those, now that same $25K is only going to take you just under 3 years. So you are shaving off 10 years of payments. and then it's going to cost you under $6,000 in interest.
So right, let's do it, people.
The craziest part is that scenario I just said does not require any extra money than the minimum payments you are already paying. All it requires is as soon as you pay off a balance, you move that payment to the next step. And you can accelerate it even faster if you do say, oh, I have an extra $50 in my spending plan. I'm going to immediately apply that. So now my first minimum payment, I'm putting 50 more bucks a month on top of that. Now you probably shaved off another 6 months.
We talked a little bit about consolidation already, how there's certain ways that make sense to do it if you are making the changes outside of just saving money, right? Like your behaviors, your spending. There's also the option to do 401k loans out of your retirement accounts. Is there any shortcut in this, or is it really just like, I'm moving furniture around on the Titanic?
I am not a fan of 401k loans. This would be like a last resort. And here's why. Immediately, you are stealing from future you. You're taking money out of your retirement. It should be in there working for you, making money as money invested and the market goes up, and compounding interest, which is a very powerful tool. As the money is not in there, it is not making money for you. So you're stealing from future you. The second danger of a 401k loan is that if you lose your job, it is likely that the loan will be due in full. So if you took a $10,000 401k loan and a year later, maybe you've paid 500, let's say 1,000, you still have 9,000 left and you lose your job, you will owe all $9,000 back. And if you cannot pay it back, now you are paying penalties for withdrawing from your retirement account too early.
I didn't know that. So I just learned something new.
So again, you could be in a position where it's literally the only thing that's going to help you get out of a situation. But I personally would say it should be a last resort. The order of which the topics we've been talking about on this podcast is not by mistake. It is on purpose. And each episode, as we've gone through them, are the steps that I think that you should follow to reach financial freedom. Creating a spending plan is number one. Putting a system in place to follow that spending plan is number two. Getting an emergency savings is number three. And now paying off your high interest debt is number four. If you're listening and you're like, I am going to attack my debt tomorrow, we're putting a plan together, please make sure you go back and follow the other steps first, because you will be the most successful at getting out of high interest debt if you have those other steps complete.
I can't wait for our next live wallet therapy session to see who opened their high yield interest account from our last episode. So I saw people on socials chatting about it. So I'm curious to see if we had any big hits. Actually, if you're listening and you did open it, leave a comment and let us know. Also, the idea of taking out money from my 401k, it just feels like a relapse waiting to happen for my spending habits, having access to more money. We have a message from a listener, and I'm obsessed with it because she's killing it. She's almost paid off 2 cards. She's saving for a house, and she has some real talk questions about what happens next. I'm going to read it now. It says, first, thank you for doing this. I know this segment is going to help lots of people, including myself. I have been paying off 2 credit cards, and they are almost paid off. I have had people tell me that once they are paid off, and I go to cancel them, it will mess up my credit. Could you talk about that more? What should I do when I finish paying them off? I'm trying to buy a house soon as well. First time buyer. Any advice there too? I've been saving for the house while trying to pay off credit. Hasn't been easy, but I've definitely managed. It definitely takes some self-control and trying not to dip into the savings. One more question is, how do you feel about Afterpay and Klarna? Is that how you say it?
Klarna, yeah.
That's such a weird word. I use those a lot when I don't want to spend a whole chunk of money at once. Thank you, sisters, for any advice. I really appreciate it.
You said Klarna like you've not heard of it. If you haven't, I'm a little proud.
No, I have heard of it. I guess in my head I pronounce it karma. Like I don't even like I don't read it.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I also like don't use it. I've only used the Afterpay a couple of times, so I'm not a frequent user of that.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll talk about why you shouldn't.
Okay.
So let's break this down. I love this question for this episode. There's a couple things to unpack here. Let's talk about the credit score, the 2-card question. She's paying them off. Should she cancel them or not cancel them? There's a couple, I would say most likely not, but a couple reasons why. Having a healthy credit score is important for a number of reasons. If you're trying to get a car, get a house, a student loan, there's certain things. It's essentially a rating on how dependable you are. So you do not want to mess up your credit score. And the answer is yes, it could possibly mess up your credit if you cancel a zero balance card after you pay it off. There's 2 important factors to consider. One is the age of your credit. So something that goes into having a higher credit score is how long have you had credit accounts? And so if one of those cards that she has is like when she was 18 and opened her first credit card, that's really important to have, because if you cancel that, now on your record, your next credit card that you opened is what the creditors see. So it could shorten the age of your credit. The second important factor that goes into her question and she should think about is the utilization limit. What does this mean? You have on all of your credit cards a balance, well, hopefully no balance if you're doing everything right, but you have a limit that you could spend. Each card, it could be $500, it could be $15,000. Now, creditors typically want to see your ratio between what's used and what's not used to be under 30%, ideally under 10%, but the lower the utilization percentage, you will get bumps in your credit score. If you're over 30%, that's really negatively going to affect it. Again, back to her situation, if she cancels these 2 cards and she has other cards that have balances on them, she could be going from under 30% to boost herself over that 30%. Those are the 2 things you want to really watch out for. You can, if you've taken all these things into consideration and the card you have maybe has a $500 limit and it's your newest card that you open and you want to cancel it, that's probably fine. But if it's going to boost you over that 30% for your utilization, or if it's an older card that you have, my recommendation would be to cut it up into little bitty tiny pieces. Take it off of your phone if you have it saved in Apple Pay, Google Pay, Amazon Pay, TikTok Pay, anything on your phone, take it off and cut up the physical card and just leave it at a zero balance.
That's what I do. I have multiple credit cards that are just left at zero. I don't even know where they are. I know nothing about them.
And sometimes credit cards will send you, it doesn't happen frequently, maybe every couple of years even, they'll say, if you don't use this card, we're going to close it. You can reevaluate at that time. Maybe at that time, it's okay for it to close out, or maybe it's really important still for your credit health that you keep it open. So you can go buy something you would be already buying, like maybe gas on that card, immediately pay off the balance just to keep that account open.
Great advice.
Now let's tackle number 2. So home buyer advice. Congratulations on saving for your first home. That is a big deal.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, brother.
And I love that she is talking about paying off her credit card debt. That is what banks want to see when you go to get a mortgage. They love to see boring people. So somebody who has no debt or very little debt. And even in terms of thinking about what are the right steps financially, if you can go into buying a house without debt, you're in a really great place. Now, I know not everybody's scenarios may warrant that situation, but that would be the ideal situation. If you can put off buying a house by a year because you're going to tackle this high interest debt, I would definitely recommend that. The other piece that I would suggest with buying a new house or being a first-time home buyer is make sure, and we talked about this a little bit, make sure you're buying within your means. I can remember the first house I ever bought. What?
I said show off.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about my real estate
history
journey. But I'll be on house number 4 at this point.
She doesn't like selling and buying, not you don't own 4 houses.
Yeah, I do not own 4 houses. No. And I would not want to. That's too many houses. I was in my early 20s when I bought my first house. And I can honestly say I don't think I considered how much the house was going to cost me or how much I could afford. I just went to a lender and said, how much will you give me? How much can I get? And that's what I used as my bracket for home buying. I went in and said, give me as much as I can get. And then that was my limit for buying a house. And I would strongly suggest against that because lenders will give you most likely too much money to go buy a house and something that you can't afford. My suggestion for her would be really think about what your monthly expenses are today. How much are you paying in rent? Do you need to pay less? Like, are you living paycheck to paycheck? Would paying less be helpful? Do you have other savings goals? Really, it is at the end of the day, live within your means. Don't go find out how much of a house you can get. Make sure you are considering how much of a house you can afford.
I would have been that person and maxed out what a lender said to me. So that is true.
Yeah. And you're in a position today where you're considering like, how much house can I afford? And should we reduce that to enjoy life more? You do not want to be house poor.
Leah and I are about to downsize. We're going to downsize our house and we are going to live so modestly that any vacation we want to take, we can take. It's all about the experiences in this house, baby.
Absolutely love that.
So tell me why I should never use Afterpay or Klarna. Klarna?
What is Klarna and what's the other one that is out there? Affirm.
Oh, Affirm, yeah. Before we move on from the house buying, if you're buying a house, make sure you're looking for first-time home buyer benefits too.
They have shifted a little from what they previously were from like that easy discount, you get X number off. They're more targeted assistance that you have to actively go after. And some are actually local benefits, like different state by state. So it's something that you should definitely research.
Research it up, girl. All right, let's get into Afterpay, Klarna, and Affirm.
I'm sure there's hundreds of them out there. They show up just oh so conveniently right when you're at checkout and you're thinking, should I buy this for $200 or should I take a monthly payment of $33? And lots of people do. I would highly advise against ever using these buy now, pay later.
Go on.
They're bad habits. So at some point, these were actually really useful for someone who is in a low income situation where you cannot afford to have a fridge in your house, and you go and get this buy now, pay later, and you can make smaller monthly payments that you can actually afford to get a necessity. That, I think, it's an important tool for you. And if you are somebody listening in that position, please utilize it so that you can have basic necessities in your house. For everybody else who's using buy now, pay later to pay for a burrito, please stop. What's happening is you are stacking up so many minimum payments that it will be so hard to keep track of and so hard to actually make sure you're paying them and not getting late fees with these buy now, pay later. If you don't stick to the original plan, your interest rates could end up being over 30%. It's bad behavior. It costs you a lot of money. And the behavior part too is really key here, where you are continuing to buy things you don't actually have money for. If you're not using it for a necessity like a refrigerator, then you should be saving for that thing that you want, the new TV or the burrito. You should be saving and paying out of your savings for that thing, out of your spending money.
Out of your spending money, not your emergency fund, unless it's an emergency.
Yes.
Well,
so they're essentially just debt in a pretty package.
Debt in a pretty package we do not want over here. I wanted to just read off some fun facts for everyone that we can wrap up this episode with. If you didn't know, the credit score only started in 1989. That is a fun fact. And before, basically, it was just vibes. You don't have just one. There's actually multiple scores depending on who's checking. Missing one payment can drop your score 50 to 100 points really quick. You don't need debt to have good credit, but you do need to use credit to build it. Checking your own credit score does not hurt it.
And for any listener that's thinking, oh, I need to use credit or I'll lose it. If you have credit card debt, you've used enough credit. You're not going to lose it as you pay off your debt. Believe me, your score will go up after you pay off your debt. We can talk about what healthy credit card usage looks like sometime down the road, but today is not the day.
Today's not the day. Alex is tired of our
shit. Pay it off.
Well, thank you everyone for another great week, another great episode of Wallet Therapy. I would like to challenge you guys to pay $5 extra on your smallest debt. Just $5 to prove to the bank that you are the boss of that dollar. Alex, any last words?
For our Patreon members, there is a debt tracker on the Wallet Therapy Master Workbook. I will also be posting a debt reduction calculator that's really fun to use because you can put all your debts in it, and then all the strategies we talked about, you can actually toggle to say, I'm going to use Avalanche or Snowball and then double Snowball. And then you can see literally the timeline it will take you to pay off your debts and how much interest it will charge you.
That sounds like a fun little sheet. You can check that out at patreon.com/BeckyHater. Thank you guys for joining another week of Wallet Therapy. Alex, my pleasure as always. Love you guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.
See you next time.
Bye.